So after getting early access to Xilonen, my first thought after testing her out was, wait, is she actually this broken? Because let me tell you, there's a ton of things that surprised me about her. And so in this video, I will showcase both of her playstyles, how good she is as a support, and if she's worth building as a DPS. On top of that, I'll compare the weapon options and some different artifact sets, and even compare her to other characters to see who is better. Most important of all, I'll answer the question if she's able to upgrade any existing teams and how much value she actually provides. So if you like what you're hearing, this is the video for you to decide if Xilonen's worth pulling for. Before we start, as a quick disclaimer, the footage you're about to watch is from the Creator Experience server, so content shown here is subject to change. Now, with that out of the way, I'll be showcasing several weapons throughout the video, but in most clips, if I'm playing Xilonen as a support, she'll be using the Favonius sword, while the artifact set is going to be the Scroll of the Hero of the Cinder City, but I'll just shorten it to Hero set whenever I refer to it. And as for talents, they are all raised to level 9, and of course, she's Constellation 0. So, what's so special about Xilonen? Well, to put it simply, she has two distinctive playstyles, depending on the team's elements. If you play her as a support with the Hero Artifact set, she essentially boosts elemental damage by 40% and can also reduce the enemy's elemental resistance by up to 36%. But on top of that, she also provides healing, and if you're using something like Favonius Sword, she can also act as a great particle generator. Now, on the flip side, she can also be played as a damage dealer. I'll be honest, without high investment and strong supports, she's not that great of a damage dealer, but you can achieve some hilarious results if you put in the effort, and I'll explain this damage potential a bit further into the video. But in a nutshell, when you tap the skill, she will deal some damage in front of her and start roller skating. But most importantly, these small colorful icons will appear next to the Night Soul bar, which the game calls them source samples or simply samples. Now, these samples will depend on the team's elements. If the teammate is of Pyro, Hydro, Electro, or Cryo element, the sample will change that respective color. But if there's less than 3 of those elements, then by default, the samples will be of Geo color. So, for example, if playing in a team with Furina, Neuvillette, Kazuha, and Xilonen, 2 of the samples will be Hydro color, and 1 will be Geo color. Since Kazuha is from Anemo element, the sample does not gain a color, and the same rule would apply for Dendro element as well. So, sorry, but Anemo and Dendro do not benefit from Xilonen's buffing. Now, when the skill is active, you'll notice the bar is decreasing. However, thanks to the first passive talent, if she has at least 2 samples of colors that are not Geo, or basically if the team has at least 2 units from Pyro, Hydro, Electro, or Cryo element, then her normal attacks during the skill will allow her to gain 35 Night Soul points. But I'm gonna be honest, literally it's enough to do 2 normal attacks and the bar becomes filled. It's very easy to fill it up. And then, once it's full, she actually exits the Night Soul Blessing mode. So goodbye roller skates, but for this noble sacrifice, this circle below the active character appears. And this is where the samples actually come into play. For each corresponding sample color, nearby enemies' elemental resistance will be reduced by up to 36% if the skill talent is maxed out. And the duration is actually pretty long, 15 seconds. So, for example, if we go back to that Neuvillette team, the Hydro and Geo resistances of nearby enemies will be reduced. It doesn't matter if there were 2 Hydro samples, the resistance reduction doesn't stack for the same elements. It's just important to have at least 2 non-Geo colored samples for this to actually work. Oh, and as you can see, the resistance reduction range is pretty decent. I am quite far away from the enemy, and you can notice the debuff is still applying. Now, I know what you're thinking. So who's better, Kazuha or Xilonen? Since Kazuha can reduce resistance with VV set, while Xilonen does that with her skill, and then he can boost elemental damage with his passive talent, while Xilonen boosts elemental damage with the hero set. Well, long story short, they both provide basically the same boosting. The results from my testing are almost identical. For example, Xilonen boosts Neuvillette's damage about 2% less than Kazuha, who has roughly 1000 elemental mastery. But keep in mind, on this test server, I cannot crown Xilonen's skill, so she ends up reducing slightly less resistance on the enemies. But get this, why compare when you can play them together? That's right, they work super well together. So in other words, if you use Kazuha with Neuvillette before and then introduce Xilonen into the team, she will help Nuvi deal about 50% more damage. And this number only becomes higher when Furina's fanfare buff is active. I mean, seriously, we're essentially talking about a second Kazuha you can use together with Kazuha. Like, just look at Neuvillette's stats when both are utilized. He can obtain more than 150% hydro damage bonus. And remember, the enemies will have up to 76% reduced elemental resistance. It's insane, I tell ya. And keep in mind, I only showcase her boosting potential with Favoni's sword, but there's Freedom Sworn, which she can easily utilize. And there's also the new signature Peak Patrol song, which can provide up to 25.6% elemental damage increase, and this maximum amount can be achieved with 3200 defense, which is not that hard to do. And you can see how much more boosting on average these swords provide if you decide to use them. Now, the skill can also be used to travel around, and of course, in Natlan, it feels amazing. You can even do this cool jump and transform into an ocelot or jaguar. I have no idea which kitty cat, but still, her skating on the ground is pretty fast and even better for climbing. I guess now we're wall running like in the Matrix. But compared to Mulaney's surfboard, it's definitely not as fast. But hey, just like with Kazuha, nobody's preventing you from using them together to traverse. In fact, in team section, I'll explain why she's kinda amazing for Mulaney as a support. But there's also the burst, so if she has at least 2 samples of non-geo colors, then it's gonna deal some damage in AoE initially, and then it will start continuously healing the active character for almost 8000 HP, which is quite big, and this can happen up to 8 times, or heal for a total of about 63,000 HP. Now, I will say this, when testing the healing with Furina's burst in Nuvi's team, I think at around 15 seconds maximum fanfare was achieved, although Furina's burst duration is only 18 seconds. So, I mean, I'm not really surprised since this is single target healing we're talking about, but still, even if the fanfare cannot be maxed out, each stack does provide additional damage for the team. Also, another cool thing about Xilonen, her second passive talent states that when Night Soul Burst is triggered, which is when anybody in the team deals elemental damage, this will increase Xilonen's defense by 20% for 15 seconds. However, if you fill up the Night Soul bar, she can trigger another Night Soul Burst, ignoring the usual cooldown limitation. And a great example for this is the hero set. Each time the Night Soul Burst is triggered, she gains 6 energy. So as you can see, when she first hits the target, she gains 6 energy, then her skill produces 4 particles, so more energy, and then finally, after the 2 hits, the bar is filled and she gains 6 more energy. So essentially, when playing her as a support, she can reduce her burst cost from 60 down to 48, which helps tremendously with her energy recharge needs. But you might be asking, Gacha Gamer, what's the point of defense for Xilonen? That's actually a great question. You see, if you play Xilonen as a support, meaning the team has at least 2 non-geo color samples, then all defense really does is help improve her healing. Because the initial hit from the skill, a couple of normal attacks infused with geo, and then the initial hit from the burst, this is an extremely small overall damage contribution she provides as a support. We're talking about at most 40 to 60,000 damage. So even if her damage scales with defense, it's negligible when playing as a support. And other beneficial stuff like the resistance reduction only scales with the talent level, and the hero set, I mean, it just gives the 40% elemental boost for the 2 elements that were part of the reaction she caused it. That's it. Well then, I suspect you might be curious by now, so let's talk about DPS Xilonen. You see, when she activates the skill, her normal and plunge attacks become infused with Geo, and both of them scale with defense. I mean, to be clear, her entire kit scales with defense. But here's the thing, without some serious buffing and investment, her damage is kinda okay. For example, I've equipped her with the Uraku Misugiri 5-star sword, and she's also using the Obsidian Codex set. And in a team with C6 Goro, Yunjin, and Furina, I mean, yeah, she can output some pretty decent damage. But this team doesn't really fully utilize Furina, since there's not that much healing going around. So then I noticed if we go back to the first passive talent, it says when she doesn't have at least 2 non-geo samples, then instead of building up the bar with Night Soul points, she gains 30% damage increase for normal and plunging attacks. Plunging, huh. I wonder how well she would work with Xinyun. Wait a second, she's actually hitting for 100 to 120k damage per plunge? Okay, this is actually pretty funny. Although one thing I've noticed is that you don't want to do that dash cancel when landing a plunge to save time, cause it drains the Night Soul bar super fast. So instead, you want to do those plunges without any tricks. Just jump up and land the plunge. And then you can do this up to 6 times, which actually becomes pretty decent damage. And I mean, if I do use the new Natlan and craftable Flute of Espitzel instead of Uraku Misugiri, the damage still ends up pretty good, although definitely not as huge. So at least in this specific team, her damage potential even with this craftable is pretty good. Oh, and regarding the burst, again, if she doesn't have 2 non-geo samples, then after the initial hit, the burst will deal AoE damage 2 more times with exact multiplier. And with buffing, the damage is pretty decent as well, since those 3 hits could result in something like 240k total damage. But yeah, the biggest takeaway with her DPS playstyle is that the Night Soul bar will not grow, and if it doesn't grow, she cannot reduce enemies' resistance, and instead, she can usually fight for up to 9 seconds by using normal and plunging attacks infused with Geo. So you're left with the choice. Do you want insane buffing, or use others as supports and play her as a damage dealer? Provided you understand this playstyle does require a lot more investment than just using her as a support, where she doesn't need amazing artifacts, she just needs to activate the hero set and have some energy recharge. Personally, I will use her as a damage dealer in open world, but for Abyss and Imaginarium Theater, she'll definitely be utilized as a support. And speaking of endgame, let's talk about some teams. Okay, so since she's from Natlan, let's talk about Natlan synergy first. And basically, besides the usual resistance shred and elemental damage boost, she's pretty amazing with Mulanni, since thanks to Xilonen's passive talent, she can trigger the second Night Soul burst very fast after filling her skill's bar. And this means by then, you should have 2 stacks, which will increase Mulanni's burst damage by 30% because of this talent. And the team that I found to be the best for now would be Furina, Xiangling, and Mulanni. I know, the creativity is almost bankrupt here. And I mean, you'll notice this trend everywhere. Furina works really well with Xilonen, since she's a healer and can even utilize Furina if you play Xilonen as a DPS. Anyway, the other teams I recommend trying out would be with another Geo unit. Navia double Geo Pyro with Benny and Xiangling is simply amazing. I remember some time ago when Navia came out, there was this complaint: she doesn't really have a great support. Well, Xilonen now absolutely fixes this problem. In fact, you could swap out Navia with Ningguang. Yeah, I'm telling this to like 12 Ningguang mains, you can actually do this. But then there's Ito, my bro. If you want to go super hardcore hyper carry, Benny, Furina, and Xilonen. Otherwise, you can remove Benny and use someone like Yelan for extra off-field damage, and more importantly, to stop being the victim of Benny's circle impact. And speaking of victims, we all know Cryo lately hasn't been doing great in terms of meta. Well, I mean, Xilonen won't provide anything new here that Kazuha or Sucrose couldn't do for freeze teams. But if you play her in something like Wriothesley, Nahida, and Benny Burning Melt team, it's a pretty nice boost to Wriothesley's damage. Of course, you can also just play her in mono pyro teams. Again, since her buffing capabilities are very similar to Kazuha's or even Sucrose's, most of these exchanges can be made without a hiccup, unless you need grouping on enemies, which obviously Xilonen cannot offer that. Still, if you do decide to play Xilonen together with Kazuha, well, I think we all know who wins here. Neuvillette just keeps getting better, doesn't he? And here's the thing, Xilonen's resistance reduction duration is 15 seconds, compared to the Viridescent Venereer set, which only lasts for 10 seconds. So if you do play her together with Kazuha or another animal unit, I found it best to first do Xilonen's buffing and then switch to Kazuha or another animal unit afterwards, simply to maintain the longest duration of both of their buffs when you switch to Neuvillette. Although, keep in mind, if you don't have a C1 Neuvillette and you replace a shielder with Xilonen, he will get knocked around easily when shooting the laser. On the flip side, Xilonen does offer resistance to interruption with C1, but I might cover this more in the future video. And I mean, you could also play them together in other teams where those buffs can stack well, because the thing is, with or without him, Xilonen has insane flexibility, since to reap the benefits of her buffing, all you need to do is just hit the enemy with some element applied to them to trigger the reaction for hero set, and then during the skill, just land a couple of normal attacks to trigger resistance shred. And of course, don't forget there's the burst you can use to heal the active unit. Most important of all, even though I cannot showcase Abyss footage due to technical reasons, I did play her in that mode. And one extremely important benefit you'll notice compared to Viridescent Venereer resistance shred, you can just keep fighting new waves of enemies when using Xilonen's skill, since unlike Vivi said, she doesn't need to reapply swirls on new enemies. I know she's potentially taking inspiration from an ocelot or jaguar, but maybe when she's older, she'll also take inspirations from cougars? I think I need help. Anyway, what do I think about Xilonen? I'll be honest, she's probably the most impactful character since, I don't know, I mean, sure, if you don't care about min-maxing and meta, whatever that is in the game's current state, then yeah, she's just simply a fun unit to explore Natlan and offers 2 playstyles. But those who are a bit obsessed with squeezing out more damage, or just simply want a really strong support, man, I'm telling you, she's really good. In fact, not only is she good for Pyro, Hydro, Electro, and Cryo elements, but she's great for Geo too, since when using the hero set, she will always end up triggering Crystallize, so that means the team will always receive 40% Geo damage increase with another element that reacted. And then resistance reduction can be easily achieved when playing with another Geo unit. So I mean, isn't she actually a Geo savior, if we think about it? Maybe not. I'm still gonna do a lot of testing, so keep in mind, this is mostly my initial thoughts. Although it would be nice if she could also boost defense or attack, but hey, she already provides quite a lot of boosting, to be honest. So yeah, I'm not sure what to tell you. To me, as someone who makes all these strategy guides, she's a very exciting addition because while she doesn't really innovate any team comps, she can be utilized as a strong support for a ton of teams, and I guess the only innovation that comes from her are the teams where you can utilize her together with Kazuha, kinda like the same way Yalan brought this idea to use her together with Xingqiu. Anyway, hope you found this video interesting. I don't think I've had any sleep for the past 48 hours when making this video, so I'm gonna catch a break, and maybe hit that subscribe button, and maybe even like button, maybe? Thanks, and see you next time.